Good morning or midday. My name is Jim Entz. I am the coordinator of Chap. I'm a professor of art here and the coordinator of Chap. I've been coming to these events most of my career here at Porterville College, and I've been involved in Chap kind of from the beginning when not the far beginning, but early on. Richard Osborne, Professor Emeritus of Anthropology, began Chap in 2002. He's a veteran as well, and he instituted this panel every fall in honor of Veterans Day. I think it's one of the more compelling events that we have every year, so it's worth. Come on in. It's worth it to do this. Let me give you a little background other than that quick moment there. The Porterville College Cultural and Historical Awareness Program, CHAP, was organized, as I mentioned before, in 2002. And its mission is to enhance students' awareness of important aspects of our society to which they may previously have had little or no exposure. A theme is chosen by CHAP members each school year. This year, the theme is the Anthropocene. And faculty members across campus are encouraged to integrate elements of that theme into their coursework, and are encouraged to encourage their students to attend these events. Events such as this with a guest speaker or speakers, a panel in this case, are offered throughout the year, free and open to the public. Now, if you would take a moment and take out your cell phones and silence them. I didn't bring mine with me, but that would be helpful. And I have proof of attendance tickets here for students. If you'd like, I'll be at the door here after the event and I'll pass those out. Okay, now with no further ado, Marilyn Pankey is our moderator, and she will ask questions of the panelists, and hopefully they'll answer them. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm assuming that a few of you out there are veterans yourself. The week isn't over yet as far as veterans are concerned, and our panel today has been very busy. And I think they will assure you that what they have to say is worth your listening to. They have spent time away from Porterville. Maybe some of them were students here at one time or another. Most of them were from a short distance away. My friend and the originator of Chap, Mr. Osborne, is not with us today, but he's our unsung hero. He started this event several years ago, and I joined him when I was president of AAUW. Our current president is here today, Maria Roman, and we do this event to honor the veterans, but also to inspire the students who have not been acquainted with the geography of where these individuals have been. And so I will ask questions, but we will start with, we want to know who these people are. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, to tell you what branch of the military they were in, where they were deployed, if they were deployed, how long they served, what rank they had at discharge, and if they had outstanding medals and honors that they were given during their years in the military. We'll start with Darla. Darla is one of our women participants. We had one last year. But Darla is going to explain what she did in the military. And these people are not used to audiences and using microphones, so if you're unable to hear or understand, please raise your hand and we'll take it from there. Okay. Darla, will you start our panel?
All right, the green light is on, that means the microphone's working, correct?
I think that's correct.
Okay. My name is Darla Rambunga. It is misspelled and it is often misspelled. I became Rambunga after I was out of the military. I did spend 4 years active duty Marine Corps. I was a military police officer. One of the first, I became a military police officer within the first year of women being allowed to be a military police officer. So I was one of the first 100 women that was able to wear a red armband. Now they wear badges, but we wore red armbands. It was a very interesting time. My furthest deployment was Hammond, Louisiana, when they decided I should become a recruiter. So I never went overseas. I made the mistake of falling in love while I was in Louisiana, and I was going to re-enlist and go overseas. And my husband advised me that he was going to divorce me if I re-enlisted. And being young, stupid, and in love, I did not realize I was postponing the inevitable. So it ended my time in the Marine Corps. I served in Southern California. It was really hard. It was 15 minutes to Disneyland. It was an hour from Magic Mountain, and the beach was right there. But it was a wonderful learning experience. I did go to basic training at Parris Island, South Carolina. That was the only place that women were allowed to go to boot camp at that time. Now they're at San Diego as well. Does that cover it?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Cody has, this is his second trip to this panel, but I'll let him tell you about that.
My name is Cody Ridenauer. I served in the United States Coast Guard as a maritime enforcement specialist. Basically, my duties were to train my units in hand-to-hand techniques, how to shoot, and then how to lead our law enforcement patrols. My first unit was in Charleston, South Carolina. We patrolled the Caribbean for anti-piracy, drug interdiction, and search and rescue. From there, I was at a air unit in Los Angeles for about 2 years for search and rescue and some drug interdiction. And then my last unit was also Louisiana, where I also met my spouse. So there's something in the water there, I guess. Huh?
There was a lot of water, that's for sure.
Water.
Yeah.
Mardi Gras.
Mardi Gras, yep. So I served 6 years, 2011 to 2017. I ended up getting out in 2017 because my back became injured. I started here at Porterville College that same year in 2017, and thanks to some peers I had, they encouraged me to go for counseling, so now I'm a counselor and professor here at Porterville College.
Our next two individuals are old friends. They've known each other a few years, and Kim is going to start off by telling us his story.
Okay, my name is Ken Story. I was in the Army in 1966 when the draft was going along in Vietnam. I learned a hard lesson. If you wind up unemployed, no one will hire you, because if you're drafted or you go into the service, they have to hold your job until you get back, if you get back. So I volunteered for the draft. I went to Fort Ord, took basic training. And from there, instead of going to advanced training, they sent me to Fort Stewart, Georgia, which nobody knew where it was or what it was. I got there and we reformed an engineer battalion, a construction engineer battalion that had been disbanded during Korea or after Korea. And we built this battalion up to 1,000 guys, and then they shipped us to Oakland, put us on a ship, and 21 days later, and we were in Vietnam. We landed, and they set us up at Benoit Air Base, and we had a battalion area there. And then they started moving us around, and we went to different places. I was sent to a place called Phuc Vinh, which I can't find on maps today. And because we were all in country at the same time, we would all be leaving at the same time, so they didn't want to just gut different companies. So I was sent to Cu Chi, which is in the combat engineers, without any combat training really. And we didn't realize we were on tunnels there. That Cu Chi, if you look in the history of of Vietnam was undermined with tunnels. The North Vietnamese were living underneath us. But the 1,000 guys that we went over together with, most of us got back. We lost 10 guys in a year, which is really a pretty good ratio. And luckily, because we went together and we had paperwork, we have reunions every year, someplace in the United States. One year we had it in Puerto Rico, but I was in for 2 years. I never made it past E4. I wasn't really interested in going on, but I was offered OCS during basic, but I was married at the time, and I decided that I wanted to get in and get out. I didn't know I was going to be divorced before I got home. I tell everybody I lost my first wife in the Vietnam War. She was shot down over a bar in Visalia while I was in Vietnam. So.
Thank you, Ken.
Well,
Happy.
my story's a little bit different. I was going to Cal Poly and was scheduled to graduate in the fall or in June of '66. At the time, the government or the military was not drafting people if they were in school. They had a deferment to finish your college or education. Well, I had 1 quarter left to do. I got my draft notice. I went and took my physical. I passed with flying colors. I decided that maybe I better do something a little bit different. At that time, the Army had a program called a college op. If you were a college graduate, you could pick your branch of the Army that you wanted to go into and apply for OCS. If you were accepted, you could become an officer. Well, I kind of evaluated what I wanted to do, and the combat engineers was the closest thing to what I had in mind. So I applied for OCS. I did go to OCS. First of all, after I got enlisted, I went to basic training, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, which most people referred to as Fort Lost in the Woods. Armpit of the Army, it was. But then I went to OCS in Fort Belvoir, Virginia, got my commission. Spent my first 6 months, in Fort Carson, Colorado, which was a beautiful place to be stationed. But then I went to Vietnam. I went over unassigned to Vietnam. I checked into the replacement depot at Long Binh. And you're all sitting around there wondering what's going to happen to you. Talking. And in Vietnam, there were 2 engineer groups. The 18th was in the north, the 20th was in the south. And it kind of split the country half and half. Well, everybody said you don't want to go to the 18th because they're up there where the going's tough and getting the Pewaddle kicked out of them. Well, where do I go? To the 18th. When I get to the 18th, they say you don't want to go to the 937th group, which is in Pleiku, which is the western portion of Vietnam, north central. I get to Pleiku, you're talking, you don't want to go to the 299th Engineers. They're in deep doo-doo up in Dak To. Where do I go? The 299th. Well, when I got there, I think you probably have heard the story that Vietnam had become political in the tail end of the deal, and our engineer battalion was assigned to the Dak To airstrip in the first phases of Vietnamization, turning the security back over to the Vietnamese. They pulled all the U.S. troops out of the area except our engineer battalion, and our main deal was to protect the Dak To airstrip. But we were there under the guise of combat support to build roads and bridges and things for the Vietnamese in the area. Well, for the first 4 months that I was there, we didn't even know there was war going on. It was in the highlands, and no humidity. God, it was great. They were making all this noise in the press about how good a job the Army's were doing of securing in the area, and which was a misnomer. But nonetheless, on the 15th of April in 1969, the North Vietnamese decided they were gonna show everybody who was boss. And they laid siege to us for 45 days at the Docto airstrip. And our engineer battalion, which normally doesn't do a lot of combat direct stuff, took almost 50% casualties in that 45 days that we were there. I was very lucky because I lived in a hole underground. I didn't come out. But after we left Docto, they pulled us out because we were non-effective as a deal. We suffered so many casualties, and our equipment, due to the aerial attacks from the 122 millimeter rockets and mortar attacks, we had very little equipment left that was operational. So they pulled us out and shipped us down to the coast at Quy Nhon, which is right on the beach in central Vietnam. And my position at the Docto, I was the battalion maintenance officer in charge of keeping everything running. And we had a pot full of equipment. We had like 40 D7 dozers. We had almost 100 dump trucks. We had cranes. We had everything you needed to build stuff. But most of this had become unoperational during the siege. So when we pulled out, the colonel that was the battalion commander at that time, and I didn't see quite eye to eye, and I have a little problem to let my mouth run away, and
It's true.
and he cornered me one day when we were at where we were doing a job site, and the guys were sitting in their dump trucks, not working on the trucks. We had a bunch of junk, and it needed a lot of work, but the guys weren't working on it, and I couldn't make them work on it because they'd stand on guard duty all night long, and then when do you sleep? And so we'd let them sleep in the trucks or take it easy. And he stood me up and said, Dubendorf, how come the guys are not working on their trucks? And I told him, I don't really give a damn about them working on the trucks. I want them to protect me at night while I'm trying to sleep. And he said, Mr. Dubendorf, you're fired. And so he sent me from there and fired me as the battalion maintenance officer and sent me to a place called Bong Song, which is north of Quy Nhon, about 30 miles, where we had a company up there, and I became the company executive officer. And that was where I ended my career. It was a completely different deal. We didn't even really in Bong Song know there was a war going on. We were building a bridge across the Bong Song River. The bridge was 420 feet long from abutment to abutment, and it was 21 feet from the bottom of the I-beam stringers to the riverbed, which was basically dry. And one time we had a monsoon there halfway through building the bridge that we got 35 inches of rain in 24 hours. If you can fathom that much, it's wet. That river, the 420 foot wide river, raised 21 feet in 4 hours, and we lost that bridge. So we spent the rest of the time trying to pick up the pieces. So that was where I was in Vietnam.
Thank you, Duffy. I forgot to mention, we will encourage questions from the audience. Anytime you have something that is on your mind that you'd like to ask either a member of the panel or maybe the entire panel, please let me know, and we will interrupt and ask them. I'm assuming from your conversations that 3 of you were volunteers
Yes.
and 1 was drafted.
Volunteered for the draft. The reason I volunteered for the draft, once you pass the physical, it's just a matter of time until you're gone. And the option is you volunteer for the draft, you do 2 years, you volunteer, and supposedly they tell you can pick your job you're going to get, which doesn't mean anything. That it doesn't really happen. You serve 3 years, and I wanted to get in and get out, and that's why I volunteered for the draft. But I don't regret it. I hear people talking about, the draft dodgers and this and that. I don't care for the guys that went to Canada, but if you had a way to get out of it and not go, it doesn't bother me.
You all describe where you were stationed, and my question to you is, that's not Porterville. So what was it like being in a place that you were unfamiliar with? Start with Darla.
Well, when I got off the plane, it was my first time on a plane, flying out of Fresno. My mother, as I was walking to the plane, hollered my name, and I said, "What?" And she said, "Find out the visiting days in the brig." And for those who may not know what a brig is, that's the jail. And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she told me, "There's no way you can go 2 months and keep your mouth shut. So I'm sure that's where I'm going to come and visit you." So I said, "Okay." And I got on the plane. It was you climbed up on the stairs. It was not in the airport, was nothing. My first time on a plane, and it felt like riding one of those at the grocery store. It was up and down, and I thought, I don't know if it's supposed to feel this way. I went to Los Angeles, they put us on a different plane, and then we went to Atlanta, and then they put us on a bus. And we were driving from Atlanta, Georgia to Beaufort, South Carolina in the dark. And it was a very strange feeling. I had never been away from home. We had traveled, we had camped, but there was nothing that looked like the East Coast where we had camped up at Lake Shasta and on the Sacramento River. It was covered with sand fleas that loved to eat you if you did not use Avon Skin So Soft. They did not like it, but so my mother mailed me some. But it was very different, and it was a different attitude. And they dropped off the men before they took us over to our side, and we watched all these men get off the bus because all the girls were kind of in the back of the bus, hiding back here. And we watched them get off and saw what they met as they got off the bus. And we literally, when they started going on, asked them if they could go back to the airport because we really weren't sure if we wanted to do that. But they did not. And then we went over, and we did not have yellow footprints like you see in the movies for the Marines. But it was so different. We endured a hurricane that came through South Carolina while we were in boot camp. Had never seen rain like that, had never seen wind like that. It was so strong that we were not allowed to go out during the time that it was active to do morning colors. We had to line up at the windows. And then, so we made it through boot camp, we did all, and then they sent me to Louisiana, and I was stationed on recruiting duty in Hammond, and another hurricane came through, and I'm thinking, this may not have been my smartest choice. And you're right there on Lake Pontchartrain, right across the lake from Louisiana or from New Orleans, and at the hurricane, and everyone else closed except the Marines. And they said, no, our recruiting station is going to be open. And since I was the lowest ranking, I was right at the front plate glass window. So I picked up my stuff and went back to the break room. And the top said, "What are you doing back there?" I said, "I'm not sitting by the window." And about 30 minutes later, the window blew in over my desk. So he said, "I guess we can board up and go home now." It was very different. It was not California. There was not put on your swimsuit and go to the beach. It was not any of that. There were alligators that would sunbathe on the sides of the roads. You could see them as you drove down the road. They're just laying out there on their back, sunbathing. And I'm thinking, and I have to get out of the car. So, it was different. It was different. It was exciting. It's not anything that I would change. But at the time, I was thinking about a lot of ways to change it. But, and you met so many people from different backgrounds. It was amazing.
Corey had got something to add to that.
Yeah. So I joined at a different time than a lot of my peers up here, and I joined as an adventurer, so to speak. And I came from a really rough and tough background, and this was kind of my step up in the world. So when I joined, I knew I've already experienced California. I didn't want to stay in California. So when I went to boot camp, towards the end of boot camp, you got to put in what's called a dream sheet, and you basically request, hey, I would like to go here, 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 and if they can accommodate, they will. So I basically chose everything away from California. So I chose South Carolina, Florida, Hawaii, Puerto Rico. I wanted anywhere but California because I wanted that adventure. I wanted that new culture. I wanted to experience something different in life. So I ended up getting South Carolina, Charleston, as my first unit. And the cutter I was on, the cutter is the boat that we sailed the Caribbean on, was called the Dallas. So when they initially gave me my orders, I thought I was in Dallas, Texas. I'm like, I don't want to be in Dallas. I joined the Coast Guard to be near the water. Why don't I go to Dallas for? So I was a little pissed off, and my company command boot camp guy saw it, and he came and shooted me. I was like, why do you have that face on? Blah, blah, blah. I don't want to be in Dallas, dude. I want to go to the beach. I want to be in the, near the water. He's like, you're going to South Carolina. I'm like, oh, you said Dallas. That's the boat, man. So got pretty excited. Went to South Carolina, and I loved it. It was a different culture. It was a different lifestyle. I learned how to shed some of my bad habits I've learned in California and gain new ones. Just something as easy as saying, hey, good morning, and smiling was something that never crossed my mind growing up in Poplar. So getting to experience that was pretty amazing. And then I got to sell the Caribbean. We got a $58 million drug bust. One of our patrols, it was 52 in cocaine, if memory serves correct, and 6 million in marijuana. So these are some wonderful experiences I had because I wanted to go somewhere other than California, experience something new. And due to my background, grew up in Poplar, I grew up a little more rough. So some of the port calls we went to, you'd have everybody else going to the nice chain restaurants. And I'm like, no, let's see where the locals are going. So I ended up, I don't know how appropriate this is, so I apologize for any peers. Please don't hold it against me in hiring panels, but went to a cockfight in Panama with some local Panamanians. So that's something that not many people got to do. Nobody else in my unit got to do it because they were all going to the chain restaurants, and I got to socialize with the locals. So it was a really great experience for me. But I will tell you that if you've never left home, there was a transitional period. There was about a month for me of transition where I felt like I made the biggest mistake of my life. I actually called one of my buddies crying, felt all alone. Felt like I had nobody. I'm not the best at making friends there, or anywhere really. So it took me a while to make some friends. But if you push through that transitional period, you'll start to make friends. You'll start to find the local places to go. You'll start to find the local things to do, and you enjoy it. So when you go off to college, when you go off to your new careers, you're going to have that transitional period. So ride it out, and it will get better. I did end up missing home for a bit, so I ended up getting stationed in Los Angeles. And then once I was there, I'm like, why did I come back to this place? And I went somewhere far away again. So in A school, they actually give you a list of places you can go. And based off your ranking in the class, you get to choose where you go. I ended up ranking third because the two people in front of me were tiny little farts, probably 100 pounds, and they could knock out 100 push-ups and run 13 miles because they were just that body size. So I had to travel a lot longer. So I got third, and I chose New Orleans. I've always wanted to go to New Orleans, and so I got stationed there. We did a lot of law enforcement patrols, a lot of search and rescue, and that's a new culture I got to experience as well, right? The Cajun French culture is very thick there. Something like I've never experienced. So I loved every bit of my travels. I enjoyed getting to know people from all around the country, from all around the world. I was stationed with people from Africa, and we got to live in the same bunks together. So these are experiences that many people have, and it really shapes how you view the world when you live in close quarters, when you get to experience new cultures and new diversities. So I enjoyed every second of it.
Thank you. Ken, what can you add?
I started at Fort Ord Basic, got sent to Fort Stewart, Georgia, which is near Savannah, but nobody knew where it was or what it was. It was in the middle of the swamp, and we learned real quick if on weekends, if you stayed on the post, they would volunteer you for something, picking up trash on the road or whatever. So we went to Savannah Beach quite a bit, and I think we made about $200 a month, so we didn't have a lot of extra cash, so we'd get about 10 guys to a room and basically go down there and party. We went, when we went to Vietnam on the troop ship, we were 21 days, we got there and they dumped us off on the outskirts of Benoit Air Base. we had rifles, but we had no ammunition for about 2 or 3 weeks, and it was kind of scary. So at Benoit, I actually had a cabinet shop. My MOS was carpenter, and I'd had a lot of cabinet experience. So I had about 20 Vietnamese working for me. We had a prefab yard, and we built barracks and trusses and latrines, and I had the cabinet shop. We were building desks and picture frames and that for the offices and things. I went from there to Thuc Vin, and they actually took over the road, protected us to get in and out of Thuc Vin, and I took a lot of pictures of jets coming in and dropping bombs right beside us, strafing. And once you got in there, the only way out was helicopter or caribou. And all the great pictures I took, I found out I had no film in my camera. And from there, I think I made somebody know that. I guess I missed. Yeah, made somebody mad. I think tipping over the officers' latrine one night. So that's when I got shipped over to Cu Chi. And like I said, Cu Chi was undermined with tunnels, and I was like Duffy. I didn't think there was a war going on until I got there, but we were getting rocket attacks every night. And the rockets were about this big around and about 6 foot long. They're called 122s. And you'd be sleeping in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden, sirens going off and explosions all over the place. And you'd dive in the bunker. We didn't have a bunker at first. We had a hole behind our barracks. And the bunker had to be built on our own time. And we weren't about to work on our own time on that until one night the rockets came close enough. They were throwing dirt on us in the bunker, and the next day we built a bunker. And I was there during what they called the Big Tet in 68, February of 68, and I had an opportunity to take a second R&R to Thailand, and one of the guys that was going to take it, his father passed away, and they let him go home. But when I came back, there were bodies all over the place, and I couldn't figure out what the hell did you guys do while I was gone. But they were, at that time, the North Vietnamese tried to overrun most of the posts. But from then on, I was like Duffy. I moved into a bunker and lived the last couple months there and got home safely.
Thank you.
Can I actually touch on something?
Sure.
If anybody's thinking about joining the military, he touched on something very important, I think. He was a carpenter. A lot of people have a misconception about the military where you're just only going to war, you're only holding a gun. No, you get to learn a trade. So if any of you are thinking about joining the military, you can pretty much get any job you can think of in the military that would be on the outside world.
But the trouble with that, there's the right way to do something, the wrong way to do something, and the Army way of doing it. Right?
Yeah.
Duffy.
Well, like I said, I saw two different sides of Vietnam. I didn't spend much time in the U.S. I was like in basic training, you don't do anything. OCS, you were lower than whale shit in the deepest ocean there until you became a senior, just before you got your commission. But in Vietnam, I wouldn't trade the experiences I had there for anything. The people that I met are friends today, and I talk to several of them almost on a weekly basis that we were together there. The old story is there's nothing tougher than a GI when the going gets tough, and that's the way it was. And the maintenance section that we had in Dak To was the largest single group that stayed in base camp all the time. The rest of the battalion would go out and work on bridges, building roads, rebuilding communities for the Montagnards. The Dak To area was probably one of the centers for the Montagnards, which were the Vietnamese Indians. They were tough little suckers. There was hardly one of them that was taller than 5 feet, but boy, I mean to tell you, they were tough. And so I was very fortunate in 2005, 5 of us that were together there went back to Vietnam for a month. And it was quite an experience. We flew into Ho Chi Minh City, which used to be Saigon. We had a vehicle, we had a van with a driver and a interpreter that we started in Saigon and drove all the way up to Hue in the north end of South Vietnam. Left from there and went to Hanoi, where we spent the last 4 days of our tour over there. And the colonel and I, being the two officers that were on this group together, we were sitting on a veranda of a Australian beer and burger place called, I can't remember the name of it now, having a beer. And the colonel made the remark that, this is a classic case of losing the battle but winning the war. There were no remnants of Vietnam left in Vietnam from the war. They destroyed all the old military installations and updated them and stuff. And the investment in Vietnam was just mind-boggling. You get outside of Saigon, huge multi-story factories doing all kinds of stuff. If you buy shrimp in the store, a lot of it comes from Vietnam. They had huge shrimp farms in Vietnam. So it was quite an experience, and the people that I met there are still, like I said, friends today. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I had no desire to go back to Vietnam under the same conditions that we were there. I don't mean the war. It was the political side of it. If you're not going to fight a war to win it, don't fight it. I mean, that's where we're getting into it today with the Israelis. The Israelis are not going to take anything off of anybody. They're going to solve the problem. I can't necessarily that I agree with everything that they're doing, but at least they've got a direction that they're heading. So, like I said, the military was a part of my life that I don't want to forget about.
Thank you. I guess that leads me to the question of, there was an interruption in your life of what you were doing when you went into the service. And when you got out of the service, were you able to resume that part of your life if you wanted to? Or did you take up something new? Can we start again with Darla?
When I left, I was waiting tables at Sambo's in Tulare. We had a big going away party. When I returned, they had a very welcome home party at Sambo's, and I went back, but I used my GI Bill and I went to school. At that point in time, I had 2 sons, and I took business classes and found that as a single mom, I couldn't support them, but my GI Bill allowed me to go back to school. I became a respiratory therapist and was able to support my children until my husband and I met. And it's amazing what you can do. What you don't learn in the military, you can learn on the outside. I had chosen law enforcement in the military. Coming out with 2 children, I did not feel that that was the appropriate future for myself, so that I would be there with my kids, and I went into the medical field. You have so many different options, and the schooling has changed so much. You can just learn so much in there. You learn how to deal with people, but then you also have the advantages of the schools that are in there. You can go in and you can become a doctor. I have one friend, she went and became a physician's assistant while serving in the Air Force. And you've got others that went in and they're now airline pilots because they learned how to fly planes while they were in. It's limitless what you can get out of the military. It's not just going in and marching around on the tarmac anymore. You've got jobs that you do, and you've got something when you come out so you can take care of yourself.
Good. Cody?
Could you please repeat the question?
Well, I think one of the thoughts that came to me while you were discussing was you were separated from your family, and you were separated from your career, from your education. When you came back from the military, did you resume that, or did you choose something different?
Oh, I absolutely chose something different. I left to get away from a bad life, So prior to the military, my father passed away when I was 18, and the only job I could find was picking up dead bodies. So I was 18 years old picking up dead bodies, and I was only making about $600 to $800 a month doing that. And I was on my own, had my own roommates and things like that. And then I would throw parties to buy groceries. Right, I had a little scheme set up where people pitch in a couple bucks, get into my party. I would recycle cans. I had a whole other scheme to get them to pitch in and pay for beer. And that's how I bought groceries. I was getting in trouble, getting in fights, things like that. So absolutely, when I got out, I did not want to go back there. And the military ironed out a lot of my flaws I had, right? A lot of those bad character traits I had. Prior to the military, I was never good at school. I actually got kicked out of Porterville College. So when I came back in 2017, I had to write a letter saying, please let me back in school. And it was reviewed by committee, and they allowed me back. And I thought, what am I doing here? I'm not good at school. Oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. I can't sit in classrooms. This is going to be tough. How can I do it? And the military taught me sometimes things suck in life and you got to push through it. So when I first got my classes, I started going to class. I'm like, hey, this is a lot easier than I remember. What was going on when I was younger? The military gave me the necessary traits to be successful. So I kept a phrase from the military in the back of my mind throughout school, embrace the suck. And it made me just rationalize, all right, well, this is going to suck, but I got to push through. So those sleepless nights were worth it. I started in 2017 as a freshman and got my master's degree in May of last year, all with the GI Bill. I don't owe a debt and student loans because of that. So the military definitely set me up for success. And I think Porterville College as well, they set me up for success as well because they helped out along the way. But absolutely not, I did not pick up where I left off. I wanted to leave that part of me in the past.
Okay, Ken, you're not running for president. What did you do when you came back?
Well, I don't know how many of you remember or recall when Vietnam, we feel like we won the war in Vietnam. According to history, we lost the war, but there were over a million North Vietnamese killed compared to our, was it 58 or 54,000 GIs that were killed. So when we came back, some of the guys went through a lot of headaches. They were spit on at airports and protesters giving them hell and everything. I flew into to Fresno and had no problems. I didn't realize that they brainwash you in basic training and through your process of going in, into the service. And I knew they were doing it to everybody else, but I was older. I was an old guy. I was 22, I think, when I got out. Most of the people in Vietnam were 18 and 19 years old, and easy to brainwash. They brainwash you on purpose, so that you're going to do what they tell you to do and when they want you to do it. And I didn't think they got me until the last day I was in, and I went to the last window at the processing center, and the lady counted out a few $100s of what pay I had coming, and had me sign a deal. And I said, where'd I go? And she said, I don't care, but just get out of my window. And I realized I didn't know where I was or where I was going. And it kind of scared me there for a little bit. But when we got out, you didn't talk about being a Vietnam veteran, because you could get in fights or people would give you hell or call you names and this and that. So you bury it in your mind. And I didn't realize how much I buried it until about 40 years later. I was at a golf course, and I asked them if they were going to buy my lunch that day, and this young man tapped me on the shoulder and said, thanks for your service. And I thought, nobody ever said that to me. And it took me a few hours to realize that nothing has ever been said to me like that. And my wife was at a reunion, and I was talking to the guys that I was in the service and served with, and we were telling a lot of wild stories of things we did in Vietnam. And she said, well, you never talked about that. And little by little, I realized I buried it all in the back of my mind, because you weren't proud of it back then. Now the guys that served in Vietnam are proud. And if you see people with these hats, Vietnam vet, we wear those on purpose, because, like I said, when I got out, I really wasn't very patriotic. I thought that my government screwed me over and wasted 2 years of my life with a war that we should have won and could have won. And now we see each other with ease, and you'll hear guys say, welcome home, brother, and thanks for your service. But we're any Vietnam vet is a brother to every other Vietnam vet. And there's some vets out there, or some of them out there, we call them posers. There's more posers than there are survivors, I think, sometimes. But I went after a party, and for a couple months I started back in the cabinet shops, and I went up and had my own cabinet business for 20 years. And I was a general contractor there too. But I got back to, I think I'm normal these days.
That's debatable.
Anything to add, Duffy?
Well, I have a little different scenario. My family were farmers, citrus farmers in Ivanhoe, and I went to college. When I graduated from college, I went in the service, and I always thought what I was going to do when I got out of the service was come back and go to work on the ranch. And when I got back, I sat down with my folks, and they said, you know, it's an awfully good living for us, and if you want to come back, I was not married at the time. They said, if you want to come back, we'll make room for you. And I said, well, hell, I'm not married. I'll look around and see what else is available. So I looked around the Visay, Exeter, Ivanhoe area, and I was all set to go to work for a farming company in Exeter, as they were changing farm managers at the time. And I was going to do that for a while till things changed on our family farm. Well, before I went to work for them, I was approached by a packing house in Exeter, a tree fruit packing house, and they were looking for a manager and interviewed me. And at the time, I didn't know a plum from a grapefruit. But I was very fortunate, and they had a very good chairman of the board that took me under his wing and taught me a lot. And I stayed there for over 30 years as the packing house manager in Exeter. And we grew from a little, excuse my French, chicken shit operation to a pretty significant deal. Our sales were in the hundreds of millions when I left. So we had several mergers, and that was my career in the fruit packing business. So the Army, though, taught me the leadership of, and created a lot of my success in the fruit packing business. The officer program that I was in, you know, they taught you the leadership principles of what to do. And the only one that I can remember today was, let's see, take charge of your actions and be responsible for your actions. And that's what I did. And when I was in the business, I tried to know better than any employee of what the job here was supposed to be doing. And it was lead by your actions, and that's what I tried to follow.
Should be running for Congress.
So
He forgot
Any questions
that.
out there? I'll go on with mine then. Some of you discuss that you used the GI Bill to go to school. Did you have any trouble accessing any benefits from the military after you left? Anybody?
I have never accessed any of them. I've gone to the VA medical deal on occasion, but I've always been fortunate enough that I've had my own medical insurance from my employer and stuff, and so that was not a problem. But I figured today I still have private insurance. Let the VA, and it's very overworked to go to the VA system. It's very good, but it's overworked. And I said, why do I need to go there and let the people that need it go and utilize it? I don't need to confuse the issue.
I used the GI Bill, went to college part-time at Mount Sac. I was working for Edison Company out of Santa Fe Springs at the time. And I go to the VA clinic. I have a 40% disability, 10% for tendonitis, which they provide me with really nice hearing aids every 4 years. And then I get 30% for PTSD.
So that's a tricky question, because once you know about the benefits, I haven't had issues. But when you get out, you're kind of lost. They don't really provide you with the correct information. They don't provide you with all the resources available to you. So once you're out and you know what questions to ask, you know where to find it, then I've had no issues, but it was to that point that I did. So you have to know what questions to ask and where to look.
You need to know who to contact that has that information. When I got out of the service, I was a single mom, and I was denied services at the VA based on my income, which should not have happened, but it did. And it wasn't until I became a VA employee that I started finding out what the rights for the veterans were, and I had never used VA at that point. And now I am the commander of AMVETS in Tulare, and one of our big programs, second to suicide awareness, is to help our veterans connect with the right people, because, as Cody said, when you get out, they don't always give you the right information that you're going to need when you get there. They are doing better with that. But you need to make sure that you know what and who you need to know when you get out of the service, just to make sure that you get what is you're entitled to. And there are a lot of veteran service organizations. We've got the Vietnam veterans over here. We've got the DAV in this area that's very active. We have AMVETS in this area. We have the American Legion, and all of those would help you if you choose to go into the military, which I would encourage everyone to go into the military. It is a learning and growing experience that is going to prepare you for the rest of your life. Not that life does not teach you, because life will teach you. But you also have that sister and brotherhood that when life teaches you, there's somebody out there saying, let me help you out. So I did have some issues with the VA when I got out. I then went to work for the VA because I wanted to work with the veterans. And then I learned how to help other veterans work through those issues. So when they come up to our office and say, this is what's happening, then I can connect them with the right people.
Thank you. Well, that's sort of my next question is, you met a lot of people eventually in the service. Do you still keep in touch with any of them? Don't you?
Yes, I do. There's probably 4 people that we all served together in Vietnam, and I have contact with them practically every week. We just call and chat for a little while. One lives in Northeast Louisiana, one lives in Athens, Tennessee, one lives in Tampa, Florida, and we are very close even today. And we got close due to the 299th Engineers, which was our Vietnam unit, had a reunion every year until last year we decided to disband. We were all getting old and it was hard for people to attend. And so we decided to fold the tent and donated the money we had to St. Jude's and a couple of military organizations. But we still have the camaraderie of the people that were together there. And there's still probably 30 or 40 people that are active in the 299th Engineers, which was quite an interesting deal for me. We'd get together around the United States, spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C., doing military history and stuff as part of the reunions. So, but like again, the friendships that I made there are life-lasting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was in a battalion and we were one whole group that went together, as like 1,000 of us, and we had a roster when we got out, so we started having reunions years and years ago. And I'm still in contact with a lot of guys, like all across the United States. But a lot of the majority of the guys that I was real close with have passed away. Some from cancer, some, a lot of that, leads back to Agent Orange. I'm in a group that Duffy and I are both in, and Richard is a member of the Central Valley Vietnam Vets. And a lot of the guys in there are combat, and they were infantry. And they didn't get to know people like we did. We knew everybody's first and last name. In there, you might be John or Shorty or California or whatever. And they didn't have ways to contact each other. And they were replacements, or they would lose the guys in their squad. And so they didn't bond, or didn't have that brotherhood. But some of them are trying to reconnect. I know I belong to a Facebook page called Vietnam Vets Only, and there's about 15,000 guys on it right now, and they're always looking for people in there. And I didn't realize how young everybody was in Vietnam. Most of them were 18, 19 years old, and they had no life. That's what always bothers me when I go see the wall. I look at the wall and I go, they were all kids. They didn't have any life, and they're gone. So. But I enjoy getting together with them, but it's getting harder and harder our reunions get smaller and smaller all the time.
I know what you mean.
One of the things I thought of too, that I go to high schools, or our group goes to high schools and talks about history classes about Vietnam, because there's nothing in the history books about it. And I always tell the kids that, everybody that was there was just a year or two older than you are right now. And you're going to leave tomorrow, and you're not going to be able to call home, because we had no phones. You used snail mail. There was no TV, no little radios. Everybody had transistor radios at the time, but it's just like there's no connection with your family. Your birthday doesn't mean anything. Christmas, I remember Christmas in Vietnam. I was laying cement, making cement by hand, shoveling it. It's just you're on your own, and it's pretty lonely. You have to have friends.
Cody.
So as mentioned, it's like a brotherhood, and I can admit I'm not the best at staying in contact. I've lost a lot of numbers. I'm not good at calling people or texting people. But on that, I have an interesting story. As she mentioned, it was my second time doing this. One of my buddies, Clancy, I got a call from him on my work telephone here at Portable College one day. He's like, "Hey, is this Cody Ridenhour?" I'm like, "Yeah." Who's this? He's like, "Did you serve in the Coast Guard?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Who's this?" He's like, "This is Clancy." So Clancy ended up Googling Cody Ridenhour, California. An article of me being on this panel popped up, and it had mentioned where I worked. So he went to the Portable College website, found my contact information on the directory, and gave me a call. And he's like, "Hey, I'm coming to California. Can I come stay with you?" Absolutely. So he drove down. He was working in LA. He came down on the weekend, stayed with me 2 different times, and we got to reconnect. It was like we never separated, really, right? It was like we've been talking this whole time. So it is like a brotherhood, and we can call each other or even stalk them through the internet and find out where they live, and still connect that way.
Harley?
I have contact with through Facebook. We have found a lot, because when I got out, I was a single mom, and that was my priority, was taking care of my kids and making sure there was food on the table for them. So I lost contact, and then there were a couple of calls that I got. "Is this Starla Fisher?" "Yes." And then, "Well, this is," we use nicknames, and hers was Frito, and we had one who was a Navy Corps person who was Squid. And we're still in contact, but we have, for our Provost Marshal's office, we have a Facebook group that is just for El Toro police or PMO people that were there, because you're there for a short time and then they send you out. It's different than when it was like you were saying, you're there, you're somebody's replacement, and then somebody comes and replaces you. Because the military leaves people in the same place longer now than they did back then. You were going to be transferred about every 2 years. So But yes, I do still have contact with people.
Many of our veterans have mentioned that it's very difficult to talk about the war with people who were not there with you or who were not familiar with what you were doing. Do you experience that in friendships today? Do you still talk about the war?
Go ahead, Kim.
I think we talk about it more now than we did for the first 20 or 30 years when we were home. And it's funny, a lot of our friends that didn't go regret it. They feel guilty, and I don't know why they do. And, you would think we would have resentment of being there and this and that, but like Duffy said, it was an experience, and I think everybody should experience it. Everybody should go in the service for a year or 2 years and get away from your mother's apron strings and find out, what it's like to take care of yourself and survive. The one thing that bugged me is how they brainwash you in there. And I knew they were doing it to everybody else, but I didn't think they got me until the day I got out. But it's a necessary evil, I guess you could say. But it's I don't regret it. Sometimes I wish I'd have done more. I almost wish I'd have gone OCS and became an officer, but I'd probably either be a private or a general, most likely a private by now.
Well,
I have a question there. Yes, sir.
Yeah, how important do you feel it is for you all to share this with others? Whether it be other people your age or younger or college kids, or how important do you feel that this is, you sharing your stories with us?
Well, we go to high schools quite a bit, our group, and I think it's kind of heartwarming for us to go there, and it brings things out that we don't sit around and talk about. We don't talk about war stories and things like that, because a lot of people think everybody in the Army's fighting, but there's probably 1 out of 10 that are actually doing the fighting. The rest of us are driving trucks or hammering or cooking or fixing trucks or this and that. There's every occupation in the world there, but it's good for us. I think it's kind of heartwarming, I guess you could think.
well, I feel that, the people that didn't go are the ones that I get the most enjoyment out of discussing what the situations and the things that we had happen to us during that period of time that they didn't get to experience. And it's been mentioned here a couple of times that, the people should appreciate the military more. And I'm a firm believer that every person, when you get to be 18, man or woman, should go into military service for at least a year, maybe 2 years. If there's not a war going on, there's a lot of community service that people could do. And the basic finding out about yourself that you find in the military is something that a lot of kids today miss. I think if you had military service, mandatory military service, you wouldn't have gang problems today, because a lot of these kids in gangs are basically just looking for leadership. And I'll guarantee you get it in basic training and stuff, because you're right at the bottom of the deal, and you learn about yourself real quick.
Cody or Darla?
Go ahead.
So when I first got out, I never really told people I served because I was just in the Coast Guard. I didn't go to war, none of that. But it wasn't until I started working here at Portable College, and Maria Roman back there, she started having me participate in different veteran events, talk to veterans and things of that sort. And then I started participating more often. And then I believe it was Richard Osborne once said in a workshop he was at, that once you get established in life, you can no longer take care of yourself or your immediate family. You have to take care of the community. You have to give back to the community. And once I became more established, something might have clicked. And there's been a few times I've just mentioned the military around younger students here at Porterville College, and there might be 1 or 2 that comes up with questions. And in my mind, that's a way of giving back, right? If they're thinking about joining the military and I can tell them honestly what it entails, what benefits they can get, and how it's helped me throughout my life, then that could have effect on their life, and that's gonna have ripples throughout their kids, their cousins, their aunts, their uncles, because they see the success that that person has had. So I think it's very important to discuss your military service, not for a braggadocious reason or anything of that sort, but just to impact others if they're possibly thinking about joining or if they have questions.
We have a society that you turn on the television and you have all this negative about your military, you have all this negative about everything. Most everything on the television is negative. So my feeling is, and we start at kindergarten with the AMVETs, and we put together our group, and we go out to the schools and we teach them about what our flag means. They don't know that every fold of the flag at a honor guard service for someone who has passed, each one has a meaning, but we teach them that. And that's our responsibility, because if you haven't been in the military, you probably don't know that. And it is, while it is healing for us, it is eye-opening for them. And we went yesterday, we were participating in, we did a color guard for the AMVET 1 bus over in Visalia. And then we went to have something to eat at Black Bear. And my heart was so touched because this mom walked up with her 2 children. And she said, my daughter was at the school that you guys were at the other day. And she says, when you walked in, my daughter said, Mama, that lady's a veteran. Can I go thank her and give her a hug? Children need to know what people are willing to go through. But if they don't learn the respect for the flag and the Constitution as youth, then they're not going to appreciate it when they get to be our age. So I think it's important that we be out there with the youth, and it also gives the youth something to look forward to other than gangs, other than having to find a different way. If we're out there and they know that they can come and we set up something for our kids, I think it should be mandatory. And I think that they used to have what they called the inactive reserves, and I'm thinking when you get out, maybe that's something that you need to do, or maybe the last year that you're in, go out and intermingle with your community as well, just to educate.
Any other questions? I think we were probably through.
Any questions, anything?
It's a fast hour, isn't it?
Yeah, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, okay. I will be over here with proof of attendance tickets for people who would like those. And thank you so much. This was really wonderful. Thank you all.
I wanted to mention that our group comes over here every year for the Veterans Day Parade in Porterville. We used to actually organize the Tulare and Visalia parades, but there was such little turnout that we quit having them. There is more people on one block in Porterville at the parade than there is in both of the parades in Visalia and Tulare. And it really, we were in it the other day and we had some guys that were in it for the first time, and I said, I'll bet you $10 that you can't ride down this street all the way without getting a tear in your eye. And nobody made it. It really makes us feel good to ride in that parade. It's worth it every bit of our time getting over here and doing it. So we appreciate Porterville.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us come over here and speak, because it's very enjoyable.
Thank you.
Relate our experiences to people that we don't know.
Thank you for your service.
All right, thank you.